All right, okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this week market analysis. Hey, so before we get started, I'll be sharing with you a quick housekeeping as well. So this session here is actually supported and sponsored by PXBT. Now, PXBT is a fairly new broker. They are also open to getting new traders in to actually test out and give them any suggestions or feedback. So over here, they're running some promotion at the moment. Right? If you're able to see on the left, there's this QR code. You can actually scan this QR code to register for your free account. And currently, what they have for a deposit bonus is that if you put in a deposit between $100 to $500, you'll be able to get a 50% deposit bonus. And if today you deposit more than 500, then you'll be able to get up to 30% deposit bonus. Now, on top of that, you'll be able to see the person in contact, Nate, his phone number there as well. So right now, they're also running a very special offer where you just need to register your account, put in a deposit of $20, and once you have done that, just contact Nate and pass him your MT5 ID, and they will actually reimburse you the $20 directly back into your trading account, or in your bank, right? So what it means is that essentially you're able to get a $20 for free just to test out their platform and of course provide them with any feedback or suggestions that you may have. Okay, so for those of you who are keen to participate in this, do scan the QR code that you can see on the screen. It will lead you to the website and you can actually register, verify your account, and make your deposit, right? And of course, on the top left, you can see Nate's contact. Do save that and reach out to him if you have any particular questions regarding PXBT. So with that, I'll jump into the session for today. Quick disclaimer over here as well. Everything that I'm covering in today's session, they're solely based on my point of view, and they do not directly translate to any sort of financial investment advice or trade signals. Right, so let's take a look at the overview of the week. Now, this week itself, we have some crucial data coming in. On Tuesday evening, we do have the Canadian CPI, where you can see over here. Okay, at 8:30 we have the CPI as well as the trim CPI year on year. So that's definitely going to be important if you are trading any particular instrument related to Canadian. Just be aware of that. And of course, if you're interested into news trading, this particular data is tradable. Then going into a later part of the week, we do have multiple PMIs data coming in. Now for me, this PMI data, they are not tier one. They're not going to be like super significant. Just bear in mind that if there's a major surprise, of course, volatility will be there. But on top of it, I don't expect much, movement from the market just because the PMI data are coming in. And then on Friday, we have the Canadian core retail sales. This would also be important, but of course, the CPI data is going to be more of the major driver for next week. So if you take a look at it overall, next week itself, the focus will be very much on the Canadian side, right? Because we don't really have a lot of like tier one high impact data. But the Canadian side, we have the retail sales as well as the CPI coming in, right? So bear that in mind as we are looking at some of the charts and opportunities going into the new week. Just have all this information at the back of your head too, okay? So let's jump into the charts over here and kind of walk you through what are some of my point of view, as well as if there's any particular opportunities that I'm personally looking out for, okay? So first up, we'll be looking at mostly the 4-hour time frame, so kind of giving you a week-to-week perspective of the market as well, okay? So this is a dollar index chart. Now, I'm overall still bearish on the dollar index. If I kind of zoom out a little bit more, I personally feel that there are more downside in which the dollar can actually move. All right, so we have this very nice impulsive drop. The market seems to be doing a little bit of consolidation. But if you just look back, right, every time we see this kind of pattern structure, it's actually a trend continuation, right? So I'm not surprised even if the market pulls back a little bit, we'll be expecting more downside. Now, if you combine the technical patterns and structures together with the overall fundamental and the macro from the dollar itself, it's not surprising to continue to see the dollar weakening, right? Because if the Fed were to actually start cutting rates as soon as next month, fundamentally that would weaken the dollar. And oftentimes when a central bank shift its policy from tightening to loosening, right, basically into cutting rates, it's not going to cut just one time, right? We'll cut multiple times, and I often say that that would naturally lead to a fundamental weaker dollar. And then, of course, as long as the technical aligns, then we have that nice little confluence, right? So how far can the dollar actually move lower? Just based on a simple technical part here, we do have this low around 100.5. Okay, so I think given where we are right now, definitely you want to be more of a bearish bias, right? In other words, any sort of a corrective pullback, perhaps to retest this area, would present a sell opportunity moving forward. Okay, and then we have the euro dollar. Euro dollar over here, I'm actually expecting some sort of a potential pullback eventually. From an Elliott wave point of view, from this low, if you take a look at it, we have our 1, 2, and of course 3 here potentially completing. It may not have fully completed yet, because looking at how this is developing, we may get some sort of a crawl or diagonal structure over here to complete the inner structure of a 1, 2, and of course 3 as an ending diagonal. Right, so the internal structure of an ending diagonal would be expecting some sort of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and if that's going to be the case, then we'll be expecting a little bit more upside, but after which we'll be looking at possible retracement back down towards some of the zones here, right? So if I align this with fits, okay, if I take from the major swing leg, okay, we have the 100% completed. All right, so that's one thing to note. If you take the inner swing leg, the 100% over here has a little bit more. Okay, so to keep things simple, and what we can expect is perhaps this will come down a little bit more, push another back up to complete the diagonal structure as I covered just now. Okay, so internally this will form a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or potentially something like that. Okay, so depending on your horizon, you know, whether you are interested to see if you can catch this short, catch this buy, or are you more of a longer term swing, okay, then you'll be looking out for areas around 1.1050 to see if you can get that sell opportunity as a pullback trade. Okay, now oftentimes when we complete a structure like that, okay, so this would be a bigger structure, right? So if you have the completion of a bigger structure like that, often we'll want to expect some sort of a 50% pullback. Right, now it's a little bit too early to kind of measure where that 50% is, because we haven't really formed a swing high. Okay, just a rough estimation, you know, you can see a little bit of a nice confluence here as well. If you look back 5618, you know, that's where some of the previous reactionary areas are. Okay, so euro dollar, depending on your time horizon, as I mentioned, you may get some short-term trades. For a swing trade, you'll be looking more of a sell side, you know, potentially after the market completes around 1.1050. Okay, that's on the euro. Now, GBP USD seems to be pretty bullish. The momentum to the upside seems pretty strong. Okay, so for my take over here is that as long as price remains above 1.2665, any sort of a corrective pullback would present as an opportunity to look for buy. Right? It's a little bit too early right now to actually start looking for buy, because the market is basically ending off last week at the top. Okay, with some serious momentum as well. So overall, you want to probably just give it some time, wait for that pullback stage, right? And of course, the pullback stage, ideally you want it to be corrective in nature, to give us the additional confidence that the buyers will be bullish. Okay, so for me, GBP USD here, really nothing much. Going into the next week itself, we don't really have a lot of news that may drive the pound, right? So I'm not surprised if next week we're gonna go into a pullback stage. Aussie dollar, I'm also bullish overall. Looking at how things have developed, okay, this little push here may be a first wave to the upside. So my take is as long as price remains above this low, okay, we are going to be bullish, and pretty much similar to the pound, we want to see some sort of a corrective pullback before committing to the buy. So the framework I'm always sharing is essentially the DST framework, right? You want to establish a direction, you need to have a setup, and then you add in the context into a trade. So the directional bias on this is pretty clear. We are overall bullish bias, but of course, if you're short term, you can potentially look for that retracement trade. But direction itself is not enough, right? You need the setup, you need the timing to execute and get out. So in terms of direction right now for GBP USD and AUD USD, we are pretty clear, but we don't have a setup, right? So eventually we'll still need to be patient, wait for the setup to come to us before we can take that trade, right? So for Aussie dollar, I'll also be patient next week. If we can get a pullback here, maybe short term, we can look for sell, but eventually I'll be more interested in the upside, okay, after the corrective pullback phase has complete. Dollar Canadian continued to push lower as of last week. We kind of ended off at the low. Now next week is crucial for the CAD because we have Tuesday CPI data coming in, and then on Friday we have the retail sales. Right. Now, should you be selling into the market open next week? Obviously, no. I always say, when the market push off impulsively in one direction, don't jump in at the end of the impulse, right? On top of that, if you're gonna add in a RSI indicator, okay, you want to also be aware and cautious that we may start to develop some sort of a divergence, right? I mean, right now we don't really have it, but what we can establish is potentially a divergence in the market that looks something like that, right? So when that happens, this would likely signal the end of a diagonal, and the pullback phase will kickstart. Okay, so dollar CAD here going into next week. Okay, having in mind that we also have the CPI data, I would love to see how the market will react after the CPI on Tuesday before really committing to any particular direction, because it really depends on how price will develop. From an Elliott wave perspective, this can be a running flag. Okay, so it can be a 1, then this is basically a ABC 3-wave correction is a running flag, and this can be a start of a new leg to the downside. Very, very possible. Alternatively, this can be a diagonal, and we'll wait for a pullback phase. Okay, and if that's going to be the case, then of course short-term upside and then eventually downside, right? So we really need to see how price is going to develop post CPI to give us more clue as to how we want to follow through with this particular pair. Okay, so at the moment I'm definitely going to be neutral, be patient, wait for Tuesday CPI, see how price is going to react off that news, then we're going to come back with more information. Dollar yen, short term, I think we're likely continuing to see the pullback. Okay, that's an impulsive, right, huge momentum drop to the downside. Right now, the market seems to be doing a pullback here. I believe this pullback may not have completed, which means that if you can get a small correction down, we may get one more pushback up. Okay, now from a Fibonacci perspective, we'll be expecting a minimum 50% area to complete it, right? So kind of look at it from a confidence point of view. We have some previous areas here as well. Okay, so dollar Canadian going into next week, if you can get a corrective pullback, I'll be interested in a short-term buy, right? Some sort of a pushback. So that would complete a 3-wave structure that looks something like that. Okay, obviously, as things continue to develop, you may even start to look out for a channel structure. And once we get a short-term buy, somewhere around 151.7, we may now then start to look for more downside, right? Now, from a longer-term macro perspective, I'm bullish on the yen, right? Which means on dollar yen, we're looking at more downside. And of course, any buy on the dollar yen will be more of a short-term pullback base. Okay? Again, from a fundamental policy, the Bank of Japan has high rates. The Fed will eventually cut rates. So we do get a central bank divergence. Okay, and oftentimes when we get a clear policy divergence, uh, the trend in the market is going to be very, very clear. And that's where we cut confluence together with technical as well. If we get a sell setup, definitely that will align on the longer term perspective. Okay, so that's on dollar yen. Okay, gold had a nice little break last week. Okay, you can see that very clean break, very strong momentum as well. So directional wise, definitely bullish. But what you want to do is you want to wait for a corrective pullback. Okay, because sometimes when the market break out like that, okay, it can easily reverse back next week and kind of give you a false break, forming a V, right? So oftentimes if you just see an impulse late and that's it, the market ends there, be patient, right? Don't just jump into the trade, wait for the pullback. If it's a corrective pullback, definitely upside, right? Maybe retest back the support, look for buy. If the market starts to develop into a crawl next week, be very cautious. It means that likely we're going to see some sort of a pullback first before maybe the continuation back up. Right? If it's going to just come down impulsively, then of course there's nothing much. Okay, that would end up being maybe a fake break. Okay, so go here. There are multiple scenarios that may develop. The idea here is just be patient, observe, see how price is going to develop before kind of committing to that. Right? Crude oil. Okay, crude oil, I'm bullish overall as long as price remains above this low. I'm going to be looking for buy opportunity. The pullback seems a little bit too shallow, which means that it's just too small. I'll be expecting some sort of a bigger development, something like that, before committing to really the upside. So this can turn into some sort of a channel structure, right? And again, from Elliott wave perspective, we want to ideally see some sort of a three-wave pullback. Okay, so that would then opens up an opportunity for us, maybe the 618, the 50%, to look for the buy. Okay, so you may need to give it a little bit of time, but of course in the near term you can capitalize on maybe this move up, this move down, and then as a swing trade you trade this up in the longer term. Okay, so some of this here, while we are waiting for opportunities, there are shorter terms trade setups that you can also look into, right? Again, at the end of the day, it really depends on your trade style. So that's on crude oil. Some very, very clear structure potentially can develop and give us some opportunities to look out for. S&P, or in fact most of the US equities market seems to have a very nice strong bounce from the low over here. Okay, so I would assume that right now the low has been established. Okay, and this three-wave leg has completed the pullback, right? Because this looks very impulsive as of now. So going forward, what I would look out for is any corrective pullback would naturally open up as an opportunity to look for a buy, with this as a primary structure in mind. Okay, so again, this ends off as an impulsive leg. You probably need to give it a couple of days to see if the market is going to pull back correctively. You don't want it to come back too fast. Ideally, maybe come back and retest this area here. That will open up the buy trade opportunity to the upside. Now, fundamentally, in macro perspective, I covered this a couple of times as well. As long as the Fed is cutting rates, okay, we are generally bullish on the equities, okay, because the whole logic behind that is as the Fed cut rates, money is relatively cheaper. And when money is relatively cheaper, people tend to borrow more. And some of those money will eventually flow into some assets, right? Including the stocks, including equities. And that will pump up demand. And that translates to prices moving higher, right? So that's kind of a macro angle. Why when interest rates are lower, equities tends to be supported, right? So that's something to look out for in confluence as well. I think going forward towards the end of this year, there's a very good possibility we're going to be bullish. Even going into 2025, we're going to be lightly bullish on equities, right? And of course, if you're interested in seasonality, you can even look into the 4-year cycle of seasonality in the US market, right? They call it the election cycle. Okay, oftentimes the first 2 years of a new cycle of the election is positive for the markets itself, and then the third year and the fourth year is a little bit more challenging. Okay, so those are some stats regarding to seasonality if you kind of like interested in that. Okay, the other two yen pairs here, like pound yen and odd yen, to be very honest, I wouldn't want to touch on them. I would just leave them aside. The only yen pairs I would be focusing a little bit more right now is the dollar yen. Okay, that's about it. Again, the yen pairs itself are very, very closely correlated at the moment, simply because of how the Bank of Japan are kind of making a very clear stance. So as I'm trading the dollar yen, or I'm like looking at opportunities for the dollar yen, I would personally just avoid the pound yen and the odd yen entirely, right? And anyway, the price pattern looks pretty much the same. I don't want to be overly exposed on the yen side. Okay, so that's on the two yen pairs. Pound Australia over here, we are bearish bias. Okay, I like this impulsive move. I like how the market break that structure very cleanly. Right now, it's doing a little bit of a correction here. So directional wise, we are definitely bearish. Okay, so very, very clear direction. In terms of setup, really depends on how you look out for it. Whether you want to go down to the lower time frame to look for a setup. There is some sort of a mini little, depending on how you would see it, triple top, double top, and of course with that you have this here as a neckline. You can look at that as a potential entry criteria. Okay, not saying that that's how you should be trading, it's just giving you ideas, right? Of course, how to execute a trade, how to manage a trade, you need to have your trade plan in place. Okay, so GBP AUD, I think it's a very clear structure right now, definitely bearish. How low it can go, potentially retesting this low. But if you're a little bit more conservative, of course, you just pull the fib. I mean, the 50 and 618 has already been tagged, right? Because of this nice impulse drop. Okay, so if you're more conservative, you may just want to look for short-term targets, maybe around this zone here, right? I mean, it's not fresh anymore. The market has been testing it a little bit. But of course, if you have more of a short-term conservative target, you'll be looking at sell, just target here. Maybe you want to manage your trade along the way, trail it, and see if you can get the move back down. Okay, that's a possibility. Right, so that's on GBP AUD. Euro Canadian here, I'm also bearish. This one here is not the cleanest structure of all, because this little pullback seems a bit sharp. Right, so what happens is this can come down a little bit, goes back up again to form a bigger correction before the drop. Okay, so that can evolve into a three-way structure. But the idea here is as long as price remains below this high, we are likely more of a bearish bias. Okay, so really depends on how market is going to work out. Okay, and of course we have the Canadian coming in next week, right? Tuesday and Friday. That might create some volatility. Now, if you go down to the lower time frame, there is an opportunity here that we can look out for. Let me just open this up. Okay, there is an opportunity here in Euro Canadian, but again, this is a very, very short-term trades based on order flow. Okay, so in the hourly time frame, we get this impulsive drop, breaking of that low, and the market seems to be pulling back. If we can get a retracement towards this territory, okay, which is around that 71 Fibonacci, that may give us a sell trade opportunity. Okay, again, not a trade signal, not an advice to trade, just giving you an idea. Okay, so over here, Euro Canadian, we are looking at bearish bars, but you realize that we're looking at a very, very short-term trade, right? H1, we're taking trade somewhere around there, or was it we're looking to get in somewhere around there. Okay, and then our targets are essentially just this low. All right, so what can happen is this can develop a 1-2 trade. We may potentially get involved in it and get out of it with profits, and then the market move up again, and from there we may look at another sell opportunity perhaps here, or even a short-term buy opportunity here. Okay, so there are many ways in which you can actually participate and take trades. Again, back to the framework. Okay, what is your direction? What's your directional bias? What's your setup to get involved in the trade? What's a context, right, to kind of build that confidence and the confluences, to help you in making that decision, right? So that's on the Euro Canadian side of things. And then lastly, we have Bitcoin, right? And this is one of the trade that I'm currently riding pretty nicely. Um, I would say it's a very, very speculative asset, but the opportunity is great. Okay, especially going forward. If I zoom out a little bit more, you can see where we are, right? I give you a bigger context, okay? So this is the futures chart, right? Just bear in mind that as well. We have the market completed a channel structure, and you realize that this channel is essentially a corrective phase, right? We have this impulsive move, very massive, and then the market do a corrective phase. Okay, it did a fake break here, but then it recovered very strongly. Okay, so some of these contexts are important, right? Where you have that impulse correction giving you a very clear long-term bias, which is bullish. Then you have the break and very strong rejection, giving you again some, kind of like getting the weak hands out of the market. Okay, that's an additional layer of confluence and context, right? And if you zoom in, we also start to see some sort of a kind of a nicer pattern here developing as well, where we have this impulse and a three-leg move. Okay, so every time we see an impulse and a three-leg move, in Elliott wave perspective, we always assume and expect a three-wave completion, right? So if you have a three-wave pullback, that may complete itself and start going higher. Okay, not all the time, but high probability. Okay. So with that, where would be the directional bias? Obviously, it's bullish, right? As long as price remains above this low, we're going to expect more upside. And how far can this go? Obviously, we'll be expecting the next leg to break the previous high, right? Obviously, we're going to be expecting some sort of a new high in Bitcoin. Okay? Now, just to share with you the setup that I have on BTC. Okay, so this is a trade that was taken over the weekend, right? Again, Bitcoin here is like literally 24/7. So you can see it's a very clean structure over here. As I mentioned on the 4-hour time frame, we have this 1, 2, 3. Our entry is somewhere around the 71% FIB. Okay, and of course we have this break of structure, demand zone here as well, right? Because the market push up, that's a small little bit of a consolidation, and then a huge move that break that previous structure. Okay, so oftentimes that is a solid demand area. Okay, so some confluences, again showing you, how I look at it from a directional bias perspective, how I analyze it, forming a bias, and then here is the setup phase, right? So I use a lot of pending orders, right? So that's actually pending buy. Basically we are about 1:1R right now. Okay, it's about 1:1R. Yeah, it's about 1.3, it's about 1:1. Okay, so essentially what I do is I shift my stops to break even and just see how far this can go, right? My target conservatively is this high, giving me a 2.4R, but of course I'll not be exiting the entire position. I'll be taking some partial profits. I'll just leave some position to run and see how far price can actually go from here on, right? So that's on BTC, right? I think that's another solid opportunity. If you're not in yet, I think you can still look for opportunities to get involved in it, right? So again, depending on strategy, depending on the setup that you have, that's the direction to focus upside. Okay, so hope that's clear. Generally, if I kind of sum up a little bit here, there are definitely some opportunities available for the week ahead. But those that involve the Canadian, my take is to wait for Tuesday's CPI to be out first, observe how price would react from the CPI, right? Whether is it going to be positive, negative, whether is it going to be a non-event, where price would not move a lot. Just wait it out, okay? And from there, we may get some clarity in terms of like dollar Canadian and the Euro CAD setup, and that will give us some opportunities that we can focus and trade. Okay. So good. I hope today's session here give you an idea in terms of like what to look out for this week ahead. Some of the directional bias that I have. Okay, and hopefully that also give you some guidance in terms of like if you're trading any of those assets, an idea in terms of like which one to focus, what direction to focus, okay, or just simply another perspective. Okay. So lastly, for those of you who missed out at the start, I'll just kind of repeat this very, very quickly. Okay. Today's session over here is supported by PXBT, right? So PXBT is a fairly new platform, but right now they are running some offers to get traders to test out their platform, give them feedback, right? So basically they're running a couple of promotions, right? So can highlight over here again. The first promotion is basically the deposit bonus, where you put between $100 to $500, you're gonna get a 50% bonus, which you can use for trading. If you deposit 500 to 1,000, you get a 30% deposit bonus, which same thing here, you can use that credit bonus for trading. Now the other promotion that they're running is just to get you started. You can register for your account, get it verified, fund the $20 into your account, and contact Nate, right? You can see his contact on the top left. Reach out to him through WhatsApp. After you have deposited $20, PM him, WhatsApp him your MT5 ID as well as your bank details. PXBT will actually reimburse you your $20, right? Essentially what it means is that you are able to get a free $20 account to test out the platform and share with them any feedback that you have. Okay, so this is the current promotion that is running. If you're interested, scan the QR code on the bottom left to register for your account, get it verified, and then you can make full use of the promotions that they have, right? Whether to fund a $20, get it reimbursed, or you can fund 100 to 500 and get a 50% deposit bonus, right? And of course, right now they are doing a 0% commission as well. Okay, so there's no additional costs when you're trading, right? So for those of you who again need to have a little bit more information, you want to understand a little bit more about PXBT, feel free to contact Nate directly, right? The contact you can see is on the top left. Okay, reach out to him via WhatsApp. So that's all for me for this week's session over here. All the best to a new week ahead, and I'll see you guys in the next session. Yeah, all the best, manage your risk well, and I'll see you guys in the next one.